My phone started buzzing at exactly 11:42 at night. In the heavy silence of my warehouse loft, the vibration against the metal drafting table sounded like a drill. I froze the stylus hovering over my tablet and just stared at the glowing screen. Dad Mobile. 2 words I hadn't seen in 3 years. 3 years, 4 months, and 12 days to be exact. My chest didn't tighten. My hands didn't shake. I just felt a cold, sharp curiosity like a scientist looking at a specimen behind glass. I slid my thumb across the screen and held the phone to my ear. I didn't even get a chance to say hello. Elara, listen to me. My father's voice was breathless, frantic, stripping away the silence of the last 3 years in a single second. We need you at the estate tomorrow. 8 sharp. Tyler is in trouble again, and the bank is being ridiculous about the accounts. We need you to sign the release forms for your Aunt Lydia's trust. Don't be difficult. Just be here. He didn't ask if I was alive. He didn't ask where I had been. He didn't ask if I was happy. He just demanded my signature like I was a broken vending machine he needed to kick to get what he wanted. Before I tell you what I did next, drop a comment and let me know. How long would you go without speaking to your parents before you decided the relationship was officially over? Let me know your number below. I didn't say yes. I didn't say no. I just pressed the red button and ended the call. The silence rushed back into the room, heavy and absolute, but this time it felt different. It wasn't the lonely silence of a teenager waiting for a birthday card that would never come. It was the strategic silence of a chess player who just watched their opponent make a fatal mistake. I didn't cry. I didn't pace the floor wondering if my mother missed me. I sat down at my desk, pushed aside my architectural blueprints, and opened my laptop. The screen illuminated my face in a cool blue wash. I wasn't the 18-year-old girl who left home with nothing but a backpack and a broken heart anymore. I was 24. I managed logistics for a massive distribution center. My entire life was built on tracking assets, auditing inventory, and spotting discrepancies in the ledger. And right now, my father's panic sounded exactly like a discrepancy. I took a sip of black coffee from a chipped mug I'd bought for 50 cents. It tasted bitter and grounded, a sharp contrast to the sugary fake conversations my family thrived on. My fingers flew across the keyboard. I didn't go to Google Maps to check the traffic to the estate. I went to the county clerk's public records portal. Then I opened a second tab for the secure banking interface I used for my own small business. I still had the login credentials for the family trust saved in my password manager, a digital key they had forgotten to revoke because they never thought I was smart enough to use it. I typed in the password. Access granted. The documents loaded row after row of PDFs and financial statements. I started reading. My eyes scanned the lines with the precision of a hawk. I saw the withdrawal attempts. I saw the declining balance, but then I clicked on the original deed of trust my Aunt Lydia had filed 10 years ago. My father had mentioned a release form. He said I needed to sign it so the bank would release the funds. But as I read the legal text, a cold smile touched my lips. Clause 4, Section B. Upon the 21st birthday of the youngest female heir, the trusteeship transfers automatically if the primary beneficiaries fail to maintain a minimum liquidity balance of $100,000. I checked the current balance. $12,000. They weren't calling me because they wanted a reunion. They weren't calling me because they missed their daughter. They were calling me because legally, without them even realizing it, I wasn't just a signatory, I was the boss. I leaned back in my chair, the metal creaking softly. The warehouse around me was drafty, smelling of cardboard and diesel, but it was mine. I had built a fortress out of solitude, and now the people who had locked me out were standing at the gates asking to be let in. I wasn't going to the estate tomorrow to surrender. I was going to conduct an audit. To understand why I could look at a legal document capable of destroying my parents' finances without blinking, you have to understand the architecture of my childhood. Psychologists actually have a term for it. They call it the glass child syndrome. It's the sibling of a high-needs or high-status child who becomes transparent. You aren't abused. You aren't beaten. You are simply looked through. My parents looked right through me to see Brittany's pageant trophies or Tyler's legal disasters. I wasn't a daughter. I was part of the drywall, necessary for the house to stand but completely unnoticeable until I cracked. The crack finally happened on my 18th birthday. I had spent weeks quietly hoping this milestone would be different. I didn't want a car. I didn't want a party. I just wanted a dinner where nobody screamed. I came downstairs that morning, wearing a dress I had bought with my own money. My mother was on the phone pacing the kitchen in her silk robe sobbing. Tyler had been suspended. Again. Something about a fight in the locker room and a broken nose. My father was yelling at a lawyer on the other line. Brittany was complaining that the shouting was ruining her focus for a casting call. I stood in the doorway for 10 minutes. Nobody looked up. Nobody said happy birthday, Elara. Nobody even poured me a cup of coffee. I was just static in the background of their chaos. I went to school, took my midterms, and came home. I thought maybe, just maybe, there would be a cake waiting on the counter. Instead, the kitchen was dark. There was a note on the fridge, but it wasn't for me. It was for the housekeeper, reminding her to pick up Tyler's dry cleaning. That night I sat on the edge of my bed and realized something profound. I wasn't waiting for them to love me. I was waiting for them to see me. And if 18 years hadn't been enough time to catch their attention, 18 more wouldn't make a difference. I didn't cry. I didn't write a tear-stained letter explaining my pain. Notes are for people who expect to be read. Instead, I reached under my mattress and pulled out a heavy Ziploc bag. Inside was $3,800. It was money I had saved since I was 14, mostly by doing homework for the rich kids in my AP classes and selling my lunch tickets. It wasn't a fortune, but it was freedom. I packed one duffel bag, 2 pairs of jeans, 3 shirts, my laptop, and my birth certificate. I walked down the hallway at 2 a.m. I could hear my father snoring in the master bedroom. I could hear the television murmuring from Tyler's room. I walked out the front door and closed it softly. I didn't slam it. I didn't want to wake them. I wanted to see how long it would take them to wake up on their own. I took a bus to the industrial district and rented a room that smelled like turpentine and dust. For the first week, I checked my phone every hour, terrified that the police were looking for me. But the phone never rang. 1 week passed, then 2, then a month. It took them 3 months to call me. And when my mother finally did, she didn't ask where I was. She asked if I had remembered to renew the auto pay on the cable bill before I left. That was the moment the daughter in me died and the architect was born. I realized I hadn't abandoned my family. I had simply resigned from a job I was never being paid for. By 8 a.m. the next morning, my phone had vibrated off the edge of the desk and onto the concrete floor. I hadn't shown up at the estate. I hadn't replied to the text messages, and now the silence was over. The siege had begun. I picked up the phone not to answer it, but to witness the sheer scale of the panic. First came the barrage from Brittany. My sister didn't type. She sent voice notes. I played one, keeping the volume low so it wouldn't echo too loudly in the warehouse. Elara, I don't know what kind of power trip you're on, but this is embarrassing. Dad is pacing the hallway and Mom is crying again. You're just jealous because we actually stuck together while you ran off to play victim. Just get here. Now. Her voice was sharp, polished, the same tone she used when a waiter brought her the wrong sparkling water. Then came my mother. Susan didn't use anger. She used weaponized nostalgia. She sent a photo of the front porch of the estate, the sun hitting the ivy-covered trellis where I used to sit and read for hours just to stay out of the way. We're going to lose it all, Elara, the text read. Your grandmother loved this house. She wanted us to be happy here. Please don't let your pride destroy this family. Finally, there was a text from Tyler. Short. Dad says if you don't come, he is going to call the cops and say you stole the car keys 3 years ago. A threat. A guilt trip. A demand. In the past, any one of these messages would have broken me. I would have felt that familiar suffocating weight in my chest, the need to fix it, the need to smooth things over, the desperate hope that if I just saved them one more time, they would finally thank me. But I wasn't that girl anymore. And thanks to my time in logistics, I had learned a very important concept in economics, the sunk cost fallacy. It's the idea that you should keep investing in a losing project just because you've already spent so much time and money on it. You throw good money after bad, terrified of walking away with nothing. I looked at the messages lit up on my screen. 18 years of obedience. 18 years of cleaning up messes. 18 years of being the designated driver, the emotional sponge, the punching bag. That was my sunk cost. If I went back to the house today, if I signed that paper, I would just be investing more of my soul into a black hole that had never given me a single cent of return. I realized then that guilt is just a currency, and my family was bankrupt. I didn't type a reply. I didn't try to explain myself. You cannot explain economics to people who think the world owes them a living. I deleted the thread from Brittany. I archived the photo from Mom. And for Tyler, I just took a screenshot of his threat, saved it to a folder labeled Evidence, and put the phone in my pocket. I wasn't going to the house to save them. But I wasn't going to ignore the legal reality either. If they were desperate enough to threaten me with police, they were desperate enough to do something stupid. I grabbed my jacket and headed for the door. I needed to see a lawyer. Not to defend myself, but to prepare the eviction notice. I met Julian at the small metal desk in the back of the warehouse office. Sarge was there too, leaning against a stack of pallets with his arms crossed, looking like a gargoyle guarding a cathedral. Julian wasn't a full lawyer, yet he was a third-year law student with a frightening talent for forensic accounting, but right now he looked pale. "You need to look at this," Julian said, his voice quiet. He spun the laptop around. I leaned in, bracing myself for bad news. I expected to see debt. I expected to see a second mortgage. But what I saw was a transaction log from the trust's private banking portal. "Look at the date," Julian pointed. February 14th. 6 months ago. There was an entry for a wire transfer, $40,000. Destination: an offshore betting account linked to a shell company. Status: rejected. "Why was it rejected?" I asked, squinting at the screen. "Read the error code," Sarge grunted from behind me. I read it out loud. Code 404, biometric mismatch. Signature verification failed. Julian clicked a file, opening a scanned PDF of the authorization form. My stomach dropped, not from fear but from a sudden icy realization. At the bottom of the page was a signature. It read Elara Vance. The loops on the E were perfect. The slant was right. To the naked eye, it was my handwriting. But I hadn't signed it. "He traced it," I whispered. "He took an old report card or a birthday card I signed years ago and he traced it onto the transfer form. But he forgot that high-value trusts require a secondary authentication," Julian explained. "The bank flagged it because the pressure points on the pen didn't match your profile. It's a clumsy forgery, Elara, but it's definitely a felony." The room went silent. The hum of the ventilation fan seemed to fade away, leaving only the sound of my own heartbeat. The pieces of the puzzle slammed into place with the force of a gavel. My father's frantic phone call, the sudden strained atmosphere, the threat to call the police on me. They weren't calling me home to sign a release form for the future. They were calling me home to ratify a crime from the past. If I didn't sign a document stating that I had authorized that transfer retroactively, the bank's fraud department would eventually refer the case to the district attorney. My father wasn't afraid of losing the house. He was afraid of going to prison. "That changes the play," Sarge said, looking at me. "You don't go there alone. Hell, you shouldn't go there at all." I stood up, smoothing the front of my work jacket. I felt strangely calm. The last lingering thread of hesitation, the tiny part of me that wondered if I was being too harsh, snapped. "No," I said, my voice steady. "I have to go." "Why?" Julian asked. "To save him." "No," I replied, grabbing my keys. "To inspect the property. Aunt Lydia named me the successor trustee. If the current trustees are committing fraud, the bylaws are clear. They don't get a bailout, they get evicted." I looked at the forged signature on the screen one last time. They wanted Elara Vance to show up, fine. She was on her way. But they were about to find out that the daughter they ignored had been replaced by a landlord they couldn't afford. I pulled my used pickup truck into the long, winding driveway of the estate. The gravel crunched loudly under my tires, a harsh industrial sound that didn't belong in this neighborhood of silent Teslas and manicured lawns. I parked right in front of the fountain. It was dry, the stone basin filled with dead leaves. It was the first sign that the facade was cracking. From the outside, the house looked majestic, a sprawling colonial with white pillars. But I knew better. I knew the roof leaked in the guest room. I knew the foundation had shifted 3 inches to the left. And I knew the people inside were rotting from the inside out. I didn't knock. I still had my key. I stepped into the foyer, the heavy oak door thudding shut behind me. The sound echoed through the house, and instantly, the chatter in the dining room stopped. They were all there, gathered around the mahogany table like a scene from a twisted Thanksgiving dinner. My father sat at the head, looking grayer than I remembered. My mother was clutching a tissue, her eyes red-rimmed. Brittany and Tyler were slumped in their chairs, looking bored and annoyed, scrolling on their phones. When I walked in, nobody moved. They just stared at my steel-toed boots, my heavy canvas jacket, the way I stood, not shrinking but occupying space. "Elara," my father said, standing up. He forced a smile that looked like a grimace. "You made it. You look sturdy." "I'm working, Dad," I said, my voice flat. "Let's get this over with." Right. Business first. That's my girl." He gestured to a single sheet of paper in the center of the table. A solitary black pen sat next to it. "It's standard stuff, just a formality to release the hold on the account so we can get Tyler's legal team sorted. The bank is just being overzealous." I walked to the table. I didn't sit down. I looked at my brother, who refused to make eye contact. Then I looked at the paper. It was exactly what I thought it was, a retroactive authorization form. "Just sign right there at the bottom," my mother sniffled. "Please, Elara. We want to put this behind us. We want to be a family again." I picked up the pen. The room seemed to hold its breath. My father actually leaned forward, his eyes hungry. I spun the pen between my fingers, feeling the weight of it. Then I dropped it. It clattered onto the wood surface, rolling away from the paper. "No," I said. The silence that followed was absolute. "What do you mean no?" Brittany snapped, finally looking up. "Just sign it so we can go. I have plans." I said, looking directly at my father, that I know about February 14th. My father's face drained of color. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. "I know about the $40,000, I continued, my voice calm and projecting to the corners of the room. "I know about the wire transfer to the offshore account. And I know about the signature that didn't pass the biometric scan." My mother gasped. "Robert, what is she talking about?" "It was a misunderstanding," my father sputtered, sweat beading on his forehead. "I was just borrowing it against your future inheritance. I was going to put it back." "It's not borrowing, Dad. It's forgery." I reached into my jacket and pulled out a blue folder, the one Julian had prepared. I tossed it onto the table, covering the release form. "According to Aunt Lydia's trust deed," I said, reciting the words I had memorized, "any attempt by a trustee to misappropriate funds results in immediate removal. Furthermore, if the trust balance falls below the minimum due to mismanagement, the successor trustee, that's me, is automatically granted power of attorney over all collateral assets." I looked around the room, making eye contact with each of them. "This house," I said, gesturing to the high ceilings, "is listed as the primary collateral." You can't be serious," my mother whispered, standing up, her hands trembling. "This is our home, Elara. We raised you here." "You housed me here," I corrected her. "You didn't raise me." "I raised myself in the spaces you forgot to check." "You ungrateful little—" Tyler started to stand up, his fists clenched. "Sit down, Tyler," I said, my voice whipping like a lash. "Unless you want me to call the fraud department right now and tell them exactly who spent that money you don't have." He sat back down. "Here is the reality," I said, addressing my father. "I am not signing your release. I am initiating a trustee review. To replenish the $40,000 you tried to steal and the legal fees for the audit, the trust requires liquidity." I paused, letting the finality of the moment settle over them like dust. "I'm listing the house for sale on Monday. You have 30 days to vacate. I suggest you start packing." "You can't do this," my father shouted, slamming his hand on the table. "I am your father." "And I am the trustee," I replied cold. "You taught me that everything is a transaction, right? You wanted me to be an asset. Congratulations. I'm the most valuable one you have. And I just decided to liquidate." I didn't wait for their response. I turned my back on the screaming, on the crying, on the sudden frantic pleas that erupted behind me. I walked to the front door, opened it, and stepped out into the cool afternoon air. As the heavy door clicked shut, cutting off the noise of my family imploding, I felt something I hadn't expected. I thought I would feel triumphant. I didn't. I felt light. I drove down the winding driveway, the gravel crunching beneath my tires one last time. In the rearview mirror, the estate shrank: white pillars, manicured lawn, the fountain that never ran. It looked like a dollhouse, beautiful, fragile, and completely hollow. I turned onto the main road and watched the house disappear behind the tree line. I didn't feel the urge to turn back. I didn't check my phone to see if they were calling. About a mile down the road, I pulled onto the shoulder. I put the truck in park and took my phone out of my pocket. The screen was lit up with notifications: missed calls from Dad, texts from Mom, a frantic message from Brittany. I didn't read them. I opened my contacts list. I scrolled down to Dad Mobile. I hit edit, then delete contact. I did the same for Mom, for Brittany, for Tyler. I didn't block them out of anger. I deleted them because they were no longer relevant to the operation. I was closing the file. When I got back to the warehouse, the sun was setting, casting long orange shadows across the concrete floor. I walked inside and locked the heavy metal door behind me. The bolt slid home with a solid mechanical clank, a sound 10 times more comforting than any "I love you" my mother had ever faked. I sat down at my drafting table. The loft was quiet. But for the first time in my life, I understood the difference between the silence of neglect and the silence of peace. The silence I grew up in was a vacuum. It sucked the air out of the room, begging to be filled with someone else's validation. But this silence, this was structural. It was the silence of a cathedral after the tourists have gone, or a library before it opens. It was waiting for me to fill it. I looked at the blueprint I was working on. Clean lines, strong foundations, load-bearing walls that wouldn't buckle under pressure. I realized then that I wasn't just a survivor. I was an architect. I had to demolish the rotting structure of my childhood, the guilt, the obligation, the desperate need to be seen, so I could build something that could actually hold me. I picked up my stylus and drew a fresh line across the screen. The warehouse hummed around me, warm and alive. I was alone, and I had never felt more complete. Elara realized that sometimes you have to demolish the old foundation to build a life that can actually hold you. If you've ever had to be the architect of your own peace, share your story in the comments. And don't forget to follow for more stories about breaking the cycle.